Alexa, what day is it?
Today is Sunday, February 25th.
Alexa, what time is it?
It's 8:38 a.m.
Alexa, turn on lamp 1.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello. This is the fourth most dreaded terror lecture. You can see our friend the eagle there with his chicks. And of course, I'm excited, and someday when you understand all this, you'll know how much I'm excited. I'm worried that I'll make this so light it's silly, or that I'll make it so grim that you'll never make it through. We're in pursuit of whatever it is that makes inbreeding kill babies, because it doesn't stop there. We've seen that the mechanism is inherited but not genetic, and it stabilizes a population of some moderate size, neither too small to survive nor too large. We've seen the Sibly curve, which is supported by massive amounts of data. Let's see here, where is it? It's not going anywhere. It shows that the mechanism in effect stabilizes populations of mammals, birds, fish, and insects just as we need it to. It would be understandable, you might say, oh, those are dumb animals. We humans choose whether we produce, and to a degree we can, but we need to look at some human data. Team led by a man named Helgason looked at data from the enormous Icelandic genealogy, and he compared the kinship of couples with how many children they had. This is what he got. Now just look at that for a while. You see 2, 3, 4. 2 means second cousin or closer according to the genealogies. Third cousin or closer and so forth. You recognize the Sibly curve, right? It begins to level off here a little bit. You know, if you pushed that too hard, you could get inbreeding depression. That's the Sibly curve in humans in a prosperous society. There's the reference. The chosen couples counted their children and calculated their kinship, not by the usual means. They went back 10 generations, counted how many ancestors they shared in that generation, the two of the couple. Then they calculated kinship in terms of, say, first cousin, or if they shared a quarter, which they didn't look at actually. If they shared an eighth, that might be second cousin, and they broke it down they broke it down into segments, second cousin and closer, and so forth. That's not the way we usually do it. If you're second cousins, your second cousin, no matter how many times, you might be fourth cousin generations before. I'm sure not many people can name all their ancestors for 10 generations back. So we don't know how we're related in terms of the Icelandic data. Well, they lumped the data, and they got that graph. It took the average number of children in each fraction and normalized it, which means they divided it by the number of children the average couple in Iceland had that Yeah, so 0 means same degree as Icelandic average. That's why you go back and look at this, you see there's the 0 line there. That doesn't mean negative children. That means it's been normalized, so it's compared with the average, and you drop below 0 if you're less than the average. They didn't go overboard explaining exactly how they did that. Um, um, where are we? We see the Sibly curve, so people are subject to the Sibly curve. Effect's not enormous, goes from about 10% below and to 20% above the national average. That's not trivial. That's a 30% difference depending on your kinship in the first generation. Now look at the error bars. These are 90% error bars. Look how tight they are. The number of children is regulated by kinship and essentially nothing else. Even out here, 6th, 7th, 8th cousin, they presumably have no idea whether they're here or here. Just thinking of families. Are you 6th cousins or 7th cousin? You'd have to go back 10 generations to get the numbers. No, they don't know it. Nonetheless, their number of children there's the 90% range and there's 90% there. So basically, nothing but kinship determines fertility. Sorry, all you folks believing in free will. You got a choice, but it is not a choice after you're married. The choice is whom you marry or establish the equivalent relationship. Some of that spread, those error bars, is due to the fact that if you look at this is grandchildren, all right? This means if you go back to look at the children and then look at the children of the children, the Sibly curves there again, we get a little bit more of the inbreeding, lack of a little bit of inbreeding compression. There's your Sibly curve. It works in the second generation too. Now these points are essentially the same as we saw before. 2 are closer, 3 are closer, and so forth. If your children marry up here, reasonably close kin, you're going to have more grandchildren than if they marry out here. This is your grandchildren, your generation. If your children marry close, basically you're likely to have more grandchildren. If they marry distant, that's fewer children. Go back a generation, look at your parents, and whether they were, how closely they were related, is now taking effect in the first generation. So in this generation, the number of offspring is somewhere between there and there, 90% limits, depending on what the previous generation had done. Got that? So let's, okay. Sibly curve, error bars, very close. And then some of those error bars are due to the next generation. Now you say, ah, you got inbreeding depression. Yeah, second or closer doesn't have as many children as third cousin or closer. Basically, that's in between there is going to be third cousin, right? Go from third cousin to second cousin. There's a decrease in the fertility, but there's your zero line. In other words, yeah, on average, you don't have as many children there as you do there. Second cousin isn't as fertile as third cousin. Well, that'd be second cousin is about there. Third cousin is there. It still beats, well, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It still beats marrying somebody unrelated. So that's not inbreeding depression. There's outbreeding depression, but we see no inbreeding depression. We'd have to carry our consanguinity, our relatedness out further, have more of it, um, in order to see it drop down below average. And we know it would. You'd probably drop down to something like um, uh, zero eventually. All right, so that's grandchildren. Sibly curve, the first generation. All right, there, Sibly curve, first generation. We're looking for a mechanism. Sibley said there had to be a mechanism for this. It's not just a fluke. His numbers were too good. Um, First generation, well, that's got to be prezygotic infertility or prezygotic variation in fertility. And here, where couples are getting married or forming up, irrespective of what their parents did, so their fertility, with the number of grandchildren, is post-zygotic, happens after the zygote forms. We'll go over that again sometime. But when I say, I remember the Iceland curve, you had both prezygotic and post-zygotic fertility variation, giving us the Sibly curve, first generation and second generation. You'll know what I was talking about this. All right, I've been over most of this. You know what a 90% confidence limit means? It means if you look at a whole bunch of examples, 90% will fall within a certain range, and it's possible to calculate that with the help of a freshman course in statistics. Um, um, People and mice apparently mate for status. We've got data um, on mice for that, and people, well, you make your own observation. Um, uh, Now, when I say kinship determines the number of children you're going to have with extreme precision, if you have a precise knowledge of the kinship, you're going to have precise knowledge of the number of children to expect. Um, and nothing else. That's not exactly true. Women take folic acid supplements, and we're going to look at that another time. Um, but for right now, for everything we know says it's all kinship. That's what determines fertility. The Sibly curve holds with ironclad, what you call it? So like, ankle cuffs and handcuffs and it controls it. That kinship, if you know all the components of kinship, you know with extreme precision. Oh, sure, some people are gonna have take pills, use means birth control. Yeah, they're gonna do that, and they're gonna use it to achieve exactly the same fertility as if they didn't use it. Yeah, I know that didn't sound like common sense, but those are the numbers. Yeah, and there are people who get run over, and that kind of reduces if they get run over as a child, that reduces the number of grandchildren their parents will have ultimately. But that's so rare we don't even see it. Folic acid will require more talking about later. In the absence of folic acid supplement, and folic acid is not a food, it's not in your food. There is folate, there's something that you can extract folic acid from, but it's not free folic acid. If that's not in your diet or whatever, um, then all this holds. What effect folic acid might have, we'll have to look at later. All right. Well, best of luck. Didn't say anything very funny this time. I'm sorry. It's going to be harder and harder to stay funny, but hang in there. We'll get it all together.